朋友们，最近一段加拿大华裔女子的视频火了。加拿大的润二代偷拍润一代破防名场面，看完真的是哭笑不得。女孩的父母看春晚里机器人表演，当场破防，大吼大叫。父亲直接说这是假的，胡说八道，他们根本不可能有这个水平。母亲呢跟着附和，对呀，马斯克都做不到，他们怎么可能做到呢？润出去几十年了，脑子和记忆还停留在几十年前。在他们的逻辑里只有中国永远落后，才能证明自己当年的选择是对的。只有把祖国贬得一无是处，才能撑住自己那可怜的优越感。真正在国外长大的下一代或许早就放下了这份执念，看得明明白白。而那些海外反华反共的蠢货，拼命证明自己选对了路，可这么多年过去了，还在看中国春晚来挑刺，实在是low 到爆， loser 到家。其实呢，说起来破防的不仅仅是海外某些反贼华人了，也包括很多的外国人。到今天他们还在用愚蠢的眼光看中国。油管上有很多中国春晚机器人节目的视频，有的评论区简直成了大型的找茬现场。一堆欧美的网民对着春晚视频逐帧分析，死活不信这是真家伙。我们这边是看个喜庆热闹，但是到了大洋彼岸，直接给看成了科幻悬疑片。现在的外网评论区两极分化是极其严重，一派呢是技术震撼党，惊叹中国机器人技术已经进化到了这个地步，而另一派呢则是死鸭子嘴硬党，他们拿着放大镜找所谓的穿帮镜头，有人研究关节运动轨迹，有人扒拉像素点找 AI 生成的痕迹，甚至还有人煞有其事的分析光影渲染等等。这个事情讽刺的地方在于，外国人的这种质疑恰恰是对中国制造最高级别的褒奖。你想想，要是台上的机器人走两步就卡顿，动作僵硬的像个铁皮罐头，人家一眼就能看出是实拍，哪还用得着费劲的去鉴定真假呢？正因为动作太丝滑，群舞配合太默契，才触动了他们认知的红线。在数亿观众盯着的直播镜头下，在声光电极度复杂的环境中，机器人要做到零失误表演，容错率几乎为零。这种高压环境下的稳定输出，比波士顿动力那种拍100遍挑1遍的精修视频含金量不知道高了多少个量级。这种心理落差其实呢也很好理解。过去这些年波士顿动力那些简单动作的视频把大家看腻了，形成了一个刻板印象，最先进的人形机器人在美国，而即便最先进也只能做些简单动作。现在中国春晚突然甩出一招王炸，而且是用一种举重若轻的武术伴舞方式呈现出来，这种视觉冲击力直接把老外的 CPU 给干烧了。另外呢，别以为这只是一场简单的娱乐表演，在资本圈眼里这就是一场面向全球的最顶级的 IPO 路演。几家头部机器人企业都在冲刺 IPO 的关口，宇树科技甚至已经开启了上市辅导。这个时候能在春晚这种级别的舞台上验明正身，比哪怕1尺厚的商业计划书都要管用。投资人看到这一幕，心里他就有底了，这个玩意它不是 PPT， 是真的能跑能跳的工业产品。海外某些人现在还在纠结视频的真假，这其实呢是一种典型的防御性心理，他们下意识地拒绝相信中国技术已经抹平了代差。但现实是残酷的，当他们还在逐帧找茬的时候，中国的产业链已经在琢磨着怎么把价格打下来了。现在的机器人的确还挺贵，动辄10万几十万，普通家庭买不起。但是你回头看看无人机，看看新能源汽车，哪一个不是从高不可攀慢慢变成了平民价？一旦中国供应链火力全开，技术成熟度再高一个等级，功能再完备一个量级，那么人形机器人走进千家万户并不是什么遥不可及的梦。 未来真正可怕的不是舞台上跳舞的机器人，而是那些在工厂搬运重物、在养老院照顾老人、在商场做导购的机器人。目前呢，像优必选这样的企业已经把机器人送进了新能源汽车的工厂实训，从识别车门锁扣到粘贴车标，这些枯燥重复的工作才是机器人真正的归宿。那么海外这帮人现在的质疑其实和当年看不上中国电动车是如出一辙。当然，再过2年，当标着 Made in China 的机器人像大疆无人机一样席卷海外市场，在他们的仓库里搬箱子，在草坪上修剪花草时，那才是真正的破防时刻。技术代差的追赶从来不是靠嘴上争辩，而是靠产品说话。春晚只是个热场子的开胃菜，真正的工业大餐还在后面呢。
Very interesting. Other analysts have pointed out that, potentially the fact that you can do a pre-programmed display in a very controlled environment on a stage doesn't necessarily prove that these are already sort of capable of being useful when you're in a factory or when you're in a home. You can't be pre-programmed. You want to be sort of acting and reacting to things as they happen. You might not have always a completely flat floor like a stage. So it's not there yet. But I mean, it's much further ahead than anyone else. And compared to sort of the images we saw of sort of robotics about 5 years ago, it's incredible.
I mean, that's cope. If you don't think this stuff is coming, and certainly I think for jobs in the next 20 years, I think that's probably a conservative estimate, that's cope. For people watching or listening, type into YouTube Atlas Robot 2008. And then look at that. Even something like a battery, lithium batteries were so inferior back then that it actually had to be plugged into the mains. So the idea of a standalone autonomous robot, just having the power supply to do this stuff, wasn't doable less than 20 years ago. It's a huge sort of marquee technology for China, 100%. I also think that, Michael, in this conversation, we're talking about China versus the United States. Where's Europe? This is a really key question, I think, for the rest of my life, your life, certainly for the next 50 years, hope we live that long, is that Europe is just nowhere in terms of these technologies. I wrote Fully Automated Luxury Communism in 2018. It was published then. And I talked about synthetic biology. I talk about renewable energy. I talk about autonomous machines. It's all happening. But I got one key thing wrong. I understated my case. It's happening far more quickly than I realized. Whether that's EVs being produced by China, the fact that BYD, China's leading EV car manufacturer, their sales in the UK in the last 12 months went up by 880%. People love these vehicles because they're cheap, right? Look at a Chinese SUV EV, compare it to a Range Rover Evoque, see how much cheaper it is, see how much cheaper it is to run. It's a much better product. Now, 10 to 15 years ago, the idea of an EV being a mass consumer product in the UK was outlandish. My view, and maybe, famous last words, general purpose robotics, which resemble humanoids, will be the same. I think it's going to be a relatively commonplace feature of our societies in about 15 years. They won't be everywhere, just like EVs aren't everywhere. And that takes a really long time in terms of diffusion and adoption. But you'll see them. They'll be around. And that point about, yes, very impressive, but it's all choreographed and it's all programmed. It's not responding to real-time stimuli. That's true, and that's a lot of computation to do that. But one of the problems with humanoid robots is an inability to mimic fine motor coordination, which, if you watch that video, guess what? They nailed it. So this is clearly a moment where we should be taking stock about what this means for our economic model. What should it mean for jobs? A great line I saw recently: any job created in the 20th century is going to disappear in the 21st, partly a function of machine learning and LLMs and AI. I think when I see videos like that, I would go a lot further back.
One of the things I like about, looking into AI and the development of it, and then also these humanoid robots, is it changes your perspective of what's like remarkable about humans. So it's always, in old debates about sort of, did we evolve or were we created by God? The argument for intelligent design was always that the eye is so complex, it couldn't possibly have sort of come about by accident. It must be a God that created it. But we kind of sorted vision really quickly. The thing we still can't sort is the hand. right? So it's the hand seems to be the part of the human body which is hardest to replicate. We can do intelligence, we can do vision, we can do voice recognition, but we're still really struggling to pick stuff up.
The brain as well. I mean, again,
the brain's good, yeah.
It's not a like for like. It's not a like for like kind of comparison, but this idea that having an AI that can approximate the human brain in terms of its synapses, that's again maybe 10, 15 years away. Does that mean you can replicate consciousness? No. Does it mean it's sentient?
You might be able to. Who knows?
You might be able to, but that's not the claim.
I'm not confident either way.
But something that's capable of the same levels of computation. I mean, that's happening. And then people say, well, not everything's information. Kind of is. You can encode information as DNA. So you can get, all the songs you listen to on Spotify that can be as encoded as DNA and saved as DNA and then re-encoded back to digital information, and you can listen back to the music again. So kind of is. But look, this is the stuff that the left should be taking super seriously. Michael, I don't know if you saw this story last week. It's partly a Hail Mary commercial kind of provocation from Elon Musk. He's saying, let's have servers in space. Because, of course, in space, they'll be cooler. You won't have lobby groups trying to stop you, but also it's better for the environment, which is true. And you'll have abundant solar energy available because they're in space. I mean, that sounds kind of good. That sounds kind of cool. The point is, who benefits from these technologies? Right now, Elon Musk is worth $750 billion US. We've seen what big tech, we've seen what social media has done to inequality over the last 20 years. My concern is what LLMs, AI, machine learning, and humanoid robots will do to inequality over the next 20 years. I fear, with our present economic model, with our present stories, with our present presumptions, it will be much worse. I don't want that to happen, which is why we have to have a politics in response.
So I suppose to go back to our previous story about, I suppose, the arrogance of some of the Silicon Valley bosses, where they think they can get to decide how their technology is used. Is there not a similar argument that can be made when you say that the question is who benefits, right? Because it might be that there are certain technologies where once you create them, the idea that we can control how they're used sort of suggests a certain arrogance as well. And I suppose in terms of Europe being...
Give me an example.
In terms of Europe being behind, right? So...
Well, these are two separate things, Michael. Come on, one at a time.
No, but because they're connected, right? Because
go on.
In terms of Europe being behind, you're sort of saying we need to catch up with China on XYZ. Now, I think on high-speed rail, yes, unambiguously brilliant.
Yeah.
FT article this week, sort of just the extent to which the Chinese built out high-speed rail just dwarfs anything in Europe. We should have done that. There's no reason we can't do that. It's not like we don't have the technology. We just don't have the political will. Should have done that. EVs, we could have done that. I mean, obviously, in terms of skill and state capacity, probably not, but I would have backed us doing that, let's say.
5G, definitely.
In terms of 5G as well. In terms of this army of robots, in the same way that I'm very skeptical that we're going to be able to control sort of frontier AI models and make sure that it's only used for good. China also, of course, ahead when it comes to drone swarms. I'm not sure the idea that Europe should have been sort of more effective when it came to the race to build autonomous humanoid robots and drones. I'm just like, maybe staying out of it and trying to regulate the tech was the best option all along.
So on this technology only being for good, I'm not saying that, and no technology is only for good. The point is about regulation, and like I say, who benefits from it? I mean, a great example about regulation is cars. Nobody says that cars today are only for good. About 30,000 people, I think, in the United States every year die from car accidents. I still think, generally speaking, people think there is a lot of positive utility that's created by cars. I would like fewer of them on the roads, right? And I'd like more public transport, but I think even if you had a complete like anti-car politics, you would say that older people and people with lots of kids should be able to access cars, right? So I don't think any technology is just for good. The point is, we have to determine the rules, conventions, applications of any technology. If you decide not to do that, you end up in a place where and it's because we had a free market ideology at the twilight of the 20th century, start of the 21st century, which is that the market always decides, don't worry about it, we don't need to have a political conversation around this stuff. Great book on this, Technopoly by Neil Postman. He says our society, really after the 1980s, 1990s, is the first society in human history where people actually think you don't need to have a view on application of technology. It's a very new mindset. He calls it a technopoly. You move from a tool-making society to technocracy to technopoly, where people use tools, finally the tools use the people. And I think that is ultimately actually a very important thing. On Europe, no, Europe probably can't make humanoid robots. Should Europe be making more of its own microprocessors in terms of a technology sovereignty argument? 100%. Should Europe be making more of its own photovoltaic cells? 100%. Should it be making at least parts of EV production going forward? 100%. Our relationship to China, to me, is the big story here. And it's not a popular claim. Ultimately, Europe needs to work out where it belongs. I think Europe is part of a greater Eurasian civilization, right? Personally. But I know lots of Brits think that actually Europe is part of the Anglophone world and has nothing to do with France, let alone bloody China. So that's part of a broader conversation. I do think China should be involved in helping us build 5G and high-speed rail. These are two critical failures in this country over the last 25 years. We are very bad at building infrastructure, nuclear power too. There's a country that's very good at building it, but our political class has decided we don't want anything to do with them because apparently, we're some peer rival to China. If you believe that in 2026, you'll believe anything.